"You are not going with us," my stepmother said, draining the warmth from the room. "This is a vacation for a real family." I did not cry or argue. I simply nodded, accustomed to being sidelined. However, she had forgotten one crucial detail. The lake house where they intended to spend 10 days belonged entirely to me. As they packed their bags, I smiled, knowing my silence was about to cost them everything. My name is Jada Ramirez. I am 32 years old, and if you walked past my cubicle at Northbridge Claims Group in St. Louis, you would see a woman who looks entirely put together. My blazer is always pressed, my spreadsheets are color-coded, and my desktop background is a serene, generic landscape provided by the operating system. I am the person people come to when they need a shift covered or a second pair of eyes on a complex liability report. I am reliable. I am present. But in the architecture of my own family, I am a ghost. I learned the art of fading into the background shortly after my 10th birthday. That was the year my mother died, leaving a silence in our home that my father could not bear to listen to. 2 years later, he married Darlene. Darlene was not evil. She did not lock me in a cupboard or force me to scrub floors with a toothbrush. In fact, she was aggressively normal. She brought with her 2 daughters, Tessa and Brielle, who were loud, vibrant, and took up every available inch of space in a room. When they moved in, the air in the house seemed to change composition. It became thicker, filled with their laughter, their arguments, and their needs. My father, desperate to keep this new, fragile ecosystem thriving, adapted to their frequency. I, however, remained tuned to a station that no longer broadcasted. I was not mistreated. I was simply edited out. It happened in small increments. When family portraits were taken, I was always placed on the far edge, the photographer gesturing for me to step in. Just a little more, until I was half obscured by Darlene's shoulder or Tessa's voluminous hair. When dinner decisions were made, the vote was usually 3-1, with my father abstaining to keep the peace. Over time, I stopped casting my vote altogether. I convinced myself that this was maturity. I told myself that making room for them was the only way to keep my father happy. I became the path of least resistance. The only thing that truly belonged to me, the only place where I did not feel like a guest in someone else's narrative, was the lake house. It sits on a quiet cove at the Lake of the Ozarks, tucked away from the main channel's chaotic boat traffic. My mother bought it with an inheritance from her own parents 3 years before she passed. It is not a mansion. It is a cedar-sided A-frame with a wraparound deck that smells of pine needles and damp earth. Inside, there is a stone fireplace where my mother used to sit on chilly October evenings, reading paperback mysteries while I played with my blocks on the rug. The house holds the memory of her in its very timber. When the floorboards creak, they sound like her voice. When the morning sun hits the kitchen table, it illuminates the scratches she made when she was teaching me how to bake cookies. Technically, legally, and irrevocably, the house is mine. My mother's will was specific. She wanted to ensure that no matter what happened to my father, I would always have a place to land. She left the house to me in a trust that transferred fully to my name when I turned 25. Darlene, however, views the house differently. To her, it is not a sanctuary of memory. It is a line item in the family portfolio that she does not have to pay for. It is a free vacation rental. It is a status symbol she can flaunt to her friends at the country club. For the last 7 years, I have let them use it. I hand over the keys with a smile. I schedule the professional cleaners before they arrive and after they leave, paying the $300 out of my own pocket each time. I coordinate the septic tank maintenance. I pay the property taxes, which amount to nearly $4,000 a year. I replace the deck chairs when Tessa leaves them out in the rain. I restock the pantry with the expensive crackers Darlene likes. I do this because I am desperate for the illusion of inclusion. I trade access to my property for a seat at their table, even if that seat is a folding chair at the kids' end. I remember one specific weekend last summer. It was late August, and the humidity in Missouri was thick enough to chew. Darlene had decided the family needed a Labor Day getaway. I had been looking forward to going down there by myself to fix a loose railing on the dock and maybe spend a few hours reading in silence. But when Darlene mentioned how stressed Brielle was with her college applications and how Tessa needed a break from her latest breakup, I caved. "We should all go," my father had said, looking at me with that hopeful, pleading expression he reserves for moments when he needs me to be the bigger person. It would be nice to have everyone together. So, I agreed. I drove down 4 hours after work on a Friday, fighting the traffic on Interstate 44. When I arrived, their cars were already in the driveway. The lights were blazing. Music was thumping so loud I could hear the bass from the gravel road. I walked in with my weekend bag, exhausted, only to find that every bedroom was occupied. Tessa had taken the master loft, my room, the room that was once my mother's. Brielle was in the guest room. Darlene and Dad were in the downstairs suite. "Oh, hey, Jada!" Tessa had shouted over the music, holding a glass of red wine, my red wine, a vintage bottle I had been saving for a special occasion. "We didn't think you were actually coming until tomorrow. The couch is super comfy, though we put fresh sheets on it." I stood there in the entryway of the house I owned, looking at the wine stain already forming on the rug my mother had hand-woven. I looked at my father. He was out on the deck, grilling burgers, his back turned to the scene. He was laughing at something Darlene said. He looked happy. "It's fine," I said, my voice tight. "The couch is fine." I slept in the living room that weekend, waking up at 6 in the morning because Darlene is an early riser who believes blenders are appropriate alarm clocks. I spent the next 2 days cleaning up their messes. I fished beer cans out of the lake. I scrubbed barbecue sauce off the patio furniture. When the air conditioning unit started making a rattling noise, Darlene looked at me expectantly, as if I were the superintendent of the building. "You really need to get that fixed, Jada," she said, fanning herself with a magazine. "It is hard to relax with that racket." "I will call the technician on Tuesday," I said, writing a note in my phone. "Why not today?" she asked. "Because it is Sunday. Darlene, it costs double for emergency weekend calls." She rolled her eyes. "Well, if you want people to be comfortable, you have to invest in the property." If I want people to be comfortable, the phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I looked around at them. Tessa was sunbathing on the dock. Brielle was posting selfies from the balcony with the caption, "Lake life, best life." My father was napping in the hammock I had bought for myself 3 birthdays ago. They were comfortable. They were entirely at home, and they had completely forgotten that they were guests. I think that was the moment the cracks began to form in my patience. Though I did not admit it to myself then, I was still operating under the heavy, suffocating blanket of duty. I told myself that this was what families did. They shared. They annoyed each other. They took up space. I told myself that my resentment was a sign of my own selfishness. After all, I had a whole house. Why shouldn't I share it? But the dynamic had shifted without me noticing. Somewhere along the line, my generosity had been transmuted into their entitlement. They no longer asked if the house was available. They informed me when they were going. They no longer thanked me for the upkeep. They critiqued the amenities. I sit at my desk now, staring at a spreadsheet that is blurring before my eyes. My phone buzzes on the laminate surface. It is a notification from the group chat named Ramirez Fam Bam. A name Brielle chose. I am included in this chat, but I rarely type. I am the observer, the lurker. Darlene, just check the weather for next month. Looks perfect for the big trip. Tessa, I need to get a new bikini. Diet starts tomorrow, LOL. Brielle, can we invite Jason? He has never been. Dad, we will see. Honey, ask your mother. I read the messages, a cold knot forming in my stomach. The big trip. They have been talking about this for weeks. A 10-day excursion in July. They haven't officially asked me for the dates yet, but I know where they are planning to go. They assume the lake house is sitting there, waiting for them, unlocked and stocked with premium crackers. I had actually planned to use the house myself that week. I have accumulated 3 weeks of vacation time, and I am burnt out. I wanted to go down alone, turn off my phone, and paint the guest room a soft blue. I wanted to reclaim the space. But looking at the chat, seeing my father's easy acquiescence, I feel that familiar slide into submission. I can already hear the conversation in my head. If I say no, I am the villain. If I say I want to be there alone, I am selfish. Why can't you just come with us? Why do you have to be so antisocial? I sigh and put the phone face down. I will let them have it. I will let them have the 10 days. I will cancel my plans and stay here in the sweltering heat of the city. I will work. I will be the good daughter. I will be the reliable Jada who facilitates their happiness at the expense of her own. I do not know yet that this time will be different. I do not know that the script I have been following for 20 years is about to be shredded. My phone buzzes again. It is a direct text from Darlene. Darlene, dinner at our place tonight? We need to discuss the logistics for the vacation. I type back, sure, I will be there at 6. I grab my purse and head out to the parking lot. The sun is blindingly bright, reflecting off the rows of cars. I feel a strange sense of foreboding, a heaviness in my chest that has nothing to do with the humidity. I get into my sedan, a sensible 4-door that I have paid off completely. I grip the steering wheel. For 32 years, I have been waiting for them to see me. I have been waiting for my father to look at me and see his daughter, not just the remnant of his first wife, not just the facilitator of his second family's lifestyle. I have been waiting for Darlene to say thank you and mean it. As I pull out onto the highway, driving toward the suburbs where my father lives in a house that Darlene decorated, I tell myself that tonight will be just another dinner. I will eat the food I do not like. I will listen to Tessa talk about her job search and Brielle talk about her boyfriend. I will agree to the dates for the lake house. I will hand over the keys. I am wrong. Tonight is not just another dinner. Tonight is the night the invisible woman finally becomes visible, but not in the way anyone expects. Tonight is the night the ledger gets opened, and I finally stop accepting the counterfeit currency of their affection. But right now, as I drive, all I feel is the tired resignation of a girl who learned too young that her value was measured solely by what she could provide. The aroma of roasted garlic and rosemary hit me the moment I stepped into my father's house. It was a smell that usually signaled a celebration, a warmth that I had spent my entire adult life trying to borrow. Inside, the dining room table was not set for dinner. Instead, it was covered in maps, printed itineraries, and grocery lists written on legal pads. Darlene was commanding the room with a glass of Chardonnay in one hand and a pen in the other. Tessa and Brielle were leaning over the table, their fingers tracing routes on the map of the lake, arguing over which marina had the best rental pontoons. My father sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who was happy to simply be allowed in the room. "Jada, you are here," Darlene said, not looking up from her list. "Perfect. We were just figuring out the sleeping arrangements." I walked over, clutching my purse strap a little tighter. I thought the sleeping arrangements were the same as always. Tessa takes the loft, and I take the couch. Darlene waved her hand dismissively. No, that won't work this time. We have to maximize the space. The Millers are coming down for the first 4 days, and Brielle invited Jason, obviously, and since the Millers have those 2 massive Great Danes, we need to keep the downstairs clear. I blinked. The Millers were their neighbors, a loud, boisterous couple who I had met maybe twice, and Jason was Brielle's boyfriend of 3 months. "Wait," I said, a slow unease creeping up my spine. "You invited the Millers? And the dogs? The house only has 2 actual bedrooms and the loft. Where is everyone going to sleep?" "We bought 3 air mattresses," Tessa chimed in, looking up with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It is going to be like a big slumber party. So fun, right?" "Right," I said, though the math in my head was flashing red warnings. 10 people, 2 giant dogs, 1 bathroom upstairs, 1 downstairs. My septic tank was going to be screaming for mercy. "Did you ask me about the dogs? The lease agreement technically doesn't allow pets without a deposit." "Oh, stop being such a landlord. Jada," Brielle groaned. "It is family. We don't do deposits." I looked at my father. He was studying a flyer for a jet ski rental place, studiously avoiding my gaze. "Dad, are you okay with that many people in the house? It is going to be tight." He cleared his throat. "Well, you know Darlene. She likes a full house. The more the merrier." I swallowed the lump in my throat. The unease was shifting into something heavier, a premonition of displacement. I walked around the table to see the grocery list. It was immense, $500 worth of alcohol alone, steaks, shrimp, cases of soda. "So," I said, trying to inject a casual tone into my voice, "when are we heading down? I requested the time off starting Friday, but I can drive down Thursday night to open everything up and turn on the water." The room went quiet. It wasn't a gradual silence. It was instant. The scratching of Darlene's pen stopped. Tessa looked down at her phone. Brielle suddenly found a loose thread on her sweater. Very interesting. My father picked up his glass of water and took a long, slow sip. Darlene set her pen down. She turned her body fully toward me, her expression composed, almost pitying. It was the look a doctor gives before delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Actually, Jada," she said, her voice smooth and reasonable. "That is what we needed to talk to you about. This trip. It is getting a little crowded." "I can sleep on the floor," I offered quickly, the reflex to accommodate springing up before my pride could stop it. "I have a sleeping bag. I don't mind. I can help with the cooking." Darlene sighed, a small puff of air that signaled she was dealing with a slow child. "It is not about the space, sweetie. Not really." She clasped her hands on the table. "We have been talking. Your father and I. This has been a hard year for us, for the girls. We really just need some time to bond, to reconnect, without any outside distractions." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Outside distractions?" "We think it would be best if you sat this one out," Darlene said. She picked up her wine glass again. "You know how it is. You are so busy with work, and frankly, you always seem a little miserable when you're there. Worrying about the coasters and the air conditioning. It kills the vibe." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I worry about the house because it is my house, Darlene. And we appreciate you letting us use it," she said, cutting me off. "But for this trip, specifically, well, look, you are 32. You have your own life. This is a vacation for a real family." The words hung in the air, vibrating. A vacation for a real family. She didn't say our family. She didn't say the immediate family. She said a real family. The implication was surgical in its precision. I was the stepchild, the leftover, the biological footnote that didn't fit into the new edition of the book. I stood there, frozen. My hands were trembling, so I hid them behind my back. I turned my head slowly toward the end of the table. "Dad?" My voice sounded small, younger than my years. I hated it. "Dad, did you agree to this?" This was the moment. This was the cliff. All he had to do was look up. All he had to do was say, "Darlene, that is not fair. Jada is my daughter. She comes with us." All he had to do was acknowledge that I existed. My father sat there. He was looking at the tablecloth, tracing the floral pattern with his thumbnail. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had weighed the cost of conflict against the cost of his daughter's dignity and had made his purchase. He did not look up. He did not speak. The silence that stretched between us was louder than any scream I could have mustered. It was a physical blow. It hit me in the center of my chest, cracking the sternum of my hope. For 20 years, I had excused his passivity as grief, as gentle nature, as a desire for peace. In that moment, I saw it for what it was. It was cowardice. He was choosing his comfort over my belonging. He was choosing the wife who managed his calendar and the stepdaughters who made him laugh over the daughter who simply loved him enough to stay invisible. "I see," I whispered. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Jada," Darlene said, picking up her pen again. "We will send you pictures, and we will leave the place clean. Just leave the extra set of keys on the counter before you go." Tessa lost hers. I looked at Darlene. I looked at Tessa, who was scrolling through Instagram, refusing to witness the carnage. I looked at my father's slumped shoulders. Something inside me, some vital structural support that had been holding up the weight of my devotion for decades, finally snapped. It didn't make a sound, it just gave way. The desperate need to please them, the frantic desire to earn my place, evaporated. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not cry. I reached into my purse. My fingers brushed against the heavy brass keyring that held the keys to the lake house. My house. I don't have them on me. I lied. My voice was steady. It was terrifyingly calm. I left them at my apartment. I will drop them off in the mailbox tomorrow. Okay, well, make sure you do, Darlene said, not looking up. We are leaving early Friday morning. Enjoy your trip, I said. I turned around and walked to the door. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Step, step, step. I opened the front door and stepped out into the humid evening air. I walked to my car, got in, and closed the door. The silence inside the vehicle was absolute. I stared at the garage door of the house I had just left. I imagined them inside, relieved that the awkward part was over, high-fiving over the itinerary, opening another bottle of wine. They thought they had just solved a problem. They thought they had just trimmed the fat from their vacation. I put the key in the ignition. My hand was no longer shaking. My father's silence had been an answer. It was the clearest answer he had ever given me. He had abdicated his role. He had surrendered his ticket. I looked at the house one last time. A real family. Okay, I said to the empty car. Okay. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I did not drive home to cry. I did not call my best friend to vent. I drove with a singular, icy clarity. They wanted a vacation without me. They wanted the house without the owner. They had made their move. Now, it was my turn. And unlike my father, I would not be silent. I sat at my kitchen table, the blue light of my laptop screen serving as the only illumination in my dark apartment. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. My phone sat face down on the counter. Silent. There were no missed calls, no texts from my father apologizing for the ambush, no messages from Tessa or Brielle saying they felt bad. The silence from their end was a confirmation of the verdict delivered at dinner. To them, the conversation was over. They had successfully pruned the family tree, removing the withered branch so the healthy ones could flourish in the sun. I did not cry. I found that I had no tears left to shed for people who could discard me with such casual efficiency. Instead, a cold, clinical clarity settled over me. It was a feeling I recognized from my work at Northbridge Claims Group. When a claim comes across my desk, I do not get emotional about the accident. I analyze the liability. I look for the facts. I look for the documentation. I assess the exposure. My family had treated me like an emotional liability. They had calculated that the cost of hurting me was lower than the benefit of their perfect vacation. What they had failed to calculate was the legal exposure of their plan. I opened a fresh browser window and logged into the County Recorder of Deeds website. I needed to see my property status in black and white. There it was. Owner, Jada Ramirez. Trust, the Elena Ramirez. Living trust. It was clean. It was mine. But then, a memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. 6 months ago, my father had asked me for a digital copy of the deed and the most recent property tax assessment. He had said Darlene was looking into bundling our insurance policies to see if she could get me a family discount on the lake house coverage. At the time, I had been touched by the gesture. I had scanned the documents and emailed them to him within the hour. I stared at the screen, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I had handed them the blueprint to my assets. If Darlene viewed the house as a family resource, she might feel entitled to leverage it. I navigated to my email sent folder and found the message. Subject: House docs for Dad. I deleted it. It did not matter now, of course, as they already had the files. But the action felt symbolic. I was closing the channels. I reached for a legal pad and a pen. I wrote Phase 1, security at the top of the page. I spent the next 2 hours systematically severing every digital tie that bound my property to them. I logged into the electric utility account. My father was listed as an authorized user, a remnant from when I was 25, and he had helped me set up the service. I clicked Remove User. The screen asked for a confirmation. I clicked Yes without hesitation. I did the same for the water company, the trash collection service, and the internet provider. Next, I pulled up the insurance policy. I called the 24-hour customer service line. The agent who answered sounded sleepy, but I was wide awake. I need to update my security phrase and emergency contact information. I told him, and I want to place a flag on the account that no changes are to be made unless verified by me personally via a two-step authentication sent to my cell phone. Is everything okay, ma'am? The agent asked, hearing the steel in my voice. I am just taking precautions, I said. I want to ensure that no one claiming to be a family member can access the policy details. Understood, he said. We have updated that for you. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was now 5:30 in the morning. I had to be at work in 3 hours, but I knew I was not going into the office today. I drafted an email to my manager, citing a personal emergency. It was not a lie. The emergency was that my life was being stolen, and I had to steal it back. The most physical vulnerability of the house was the keys. Over the years, I had given spare keys to my father, Darlene, and even Tessa. They were standard brass keys, easily copied at any hardware store for $2. I had no idea how many copies were floating around. Darlene probably had one on her keychain, one in her purse, and one hidden in her glove box. I searched for a locksmith in the Lake of the Ozarks area. I did not choose the local guy, old Mr. Henderson, whom my father had known for years. Henderson would call my dad the moment I made a request, asking if everything was all right. Instead, I found a large corporate security firm based 2 towns over. They advertised high-security systems and biometric locks. I called them as soon as they opened at 8 o'clock. I need a complete rekey of a residential property, I told the dispatcher, and I need it done today. We are pretty booked up, ma'am, the voice on the other end said. We could probably get someone out there by next Tuesday. I will pay double the emergency rate, I said, my voice flat. And I need deadbolts installed on the front and back doors that are pick-resistant. I also want to purchase a smart lock system for the main entry. There was a pause on the line. If you are willing to cover the rush fee, I can pull a technician off a commercial job. He can be there by 3 o'clock this afternoon. Do it, I said. I will be there to meet him. My next purchase was a set of wireless security cameras. I ordered a doorbell camera and 3 perimeter floodlight cameras from an online retailer, selecting the option for same-day delivery to a locker location near the lake. I would pick them up on my way in. I stood up and walked to my bedroom to pack. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet, the same suitcase I'd planned to use for my quiet week alone, but I was not packing swimsuits and paperback novels. I packed my laptop, a portable hotspot, and the physical folder containing the original deed and trust documents. I packed as if I were going to war. As I zipped the bag shut, I realized one flaw in my plan. If I went down there alone, and they arrived on Friday to find me there, it would be 4 against 1. They would wheedle. They would scream. They would gaslight me until I felt crazy. They would use their physical presence to overwhelm me. Darlene would march in, put her bag on the counter, and dare me to throw her out. My father would give me that sad, disappointed look that usually made me crumble. I needed witnesses. I needed a buffer. I needed people who saw me as Jada the person, not Jada the convenient doormat. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Sarah's contact. Sarah had been my best friend since college. She was a lawyer, sharp-tongued and fiercely loyal. She had never liked Darlene. She had told me for years that I was being used, but I had never listened. I hit dial. She answered on the second ring. Hey, everything okay? She asked. You never call at 8:30 on a Wednesday. I need a favor, I said. A big one. Name it. I need you to come to the lake house, today, and stay until the weekend. The lake house? Sarah sounded confused. I thought your family was doing their big Royal Ramirez summit this week. They are, I said. They uninvited me last night. They told me it was for a real family only, but they still plan to use my house. Excuse me? Sarah's voice dropped an octave. They said what? I am going down there to change the locks and secure the property before they arrive on Friday. I explained. I need you there. I don't want to be alone when they show up. And I need people there to occupy the space. If the house is full of my guests, they can't claim they have nowhere else to go. I am clearing my schedule, Sarah said instantly. I have a few depositions I can move. I will be on the road by noon. Can I bring Marcus? Marcus was her husband, a 6'4" gym owner who was the gentlest man I knew, but looked like he could bench press a truck. Yes, I said, feeling a wave of relief so strong it almost made my knees buckle. Please bring Marcus. We are in, Sarah said. We will bring the wine. You just bring the righteous indignation. I hung up and felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the absence of weight, for so long. I had been carrying the heavy burden of trying to fit into a space that was too small for me. Now that I had stopped trying to squeeze myself in, I felt expansive. I felt powerful. I checked my bank account. I had plenty of savings. I had been saving for a down payment on a bigger apartment, but investing in my dignity seemed like a better use of the funds. I transferred $2,000 to my checking account to cover the locksmith, the security system, and enough groceries to feed an army of my own making. I left my apartment at 10 o'clock in the morning. I stopped at the post office to put a hold on my mail. I stopped at the bank to get a notarized affidavit of ownership, just in case the police were called. I was thinking 3 steps ahead. As I drove out of the city, merging onto the highway that led south, I passed the exit for my father's subdivision. I felt a phantom pull, a ghostly urge to turn off and go to his house, to beg him to fix this, to plead for my spot back on the folding chair. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. No, I said aloud to the empty car. I turned up the radio. I drove past the exit. By the time I reached the winding roads that led to the lake, the sun was high and hot. The trees were a lush, vibrant green. I pulled into the gravel driveway of my house at 2 p.m. It stood there, silent and waiting. The brown cedar siding was warm in the sun. The deck overlooked the glittering water. I got out of the car and walked up the steps. I used my key to unlock the front door, the key that would be obsolete in less than 2 hours. The air inside was stale and hot. I walked around, opening windows, turning on the ceiling fans. I walked into the kitchen and saw the empty space on the counter where Darlene usually set up her margarita station. I walked into the living room and looked at the couch where I had slept so many nights, listening to them laugh in the other rooms. I stood in the center of the room and spoke to the empty house. You are safe now, I whispered. I am not letting them hurt you anymore. A van pulled into the driveway. The side read, Titan Security Solutions. The technician, a burly man with a tool belt, hopped out. Jada Ramirez? He called out. That is me, I said, stepping out onto the deck. I am the owner. Ready to lock this place down? He asked. You have no idea, I replied. As he began drilling into the doorframe, the sound of the metal grinding was the most satisfying thing I had heard in years. It sounded like a seal breaking. It sounded like a vault closing. I sat on the deck furniture, watching the lake, and waited for Sarah and Marcus. I checked my phone. There was a text from Darlene in the family group chat. Darlene, can't wait for Friday. Girls, make sure you pack sunscreen. Jada, don't forget those keys. I looked at the message. I did not reply. I simply deleted the thread and then, with a swipe of my finger, I left the group. The notification would pop up on their phones. Jada has left the conversation. Let them wonder. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think I was just being a brat. They would find out soon enough that I wasn't pouting. I was fortifying. By the time the sun began to set, the locks were changed. The new keys, heavy, silver, high-security keys that could not be duplicated at a kiosk, were in my pocket. The cameras were mounted, their little blue lights blinking, recording every approach, Sarah and Marcus had arrived, filling the fridge with craft beer and steaks, their laughter filling the space that had always felt so lonely when my family was here. We sat on the deck as twilight fell, the sky turning a bruised purple. "So," Marcus said, taking a sip of his beer, "what is the game plan for Friday?" "Simple," I said, staring at the long driveway that wound through the woods. "We treat them like what they are, unauthorized visitors." "And if they have keys?" Sarah asked. I pulled the new silver key from my pocket and held it up, catching the last of the light. "Let them try," I said. "This isn't their vacation home anymore. It is a fortress." I felt a calm resolve settle into my bones. I was done being the daughter who begged for scraps. I was the homeowner now, and eviction notice was about to be served in person. The Friday morning sun was beating down on the asphalt of the driveway, baking the gravel until the air shimmered with heat. Inside the house, the temperature was a perfect 68 degrees. I was sitting at the kitchen island with Sarah and Marcus. On the counter, my laptop was open, displaying the live feed from the 4 high-definition security cameras I had installed just 48 hours prior. "They are early," Sarah noted, glancing at the time on the microwave. "You said they usually roll in around 3. "Darlene likes to maximize the first day," I replied, taking a sip of iced tea. My hand was steady. "She thinks if she gets here by noon, it counts as a full vacation day." On the screen, a cloud of dust heralded their arrival. It was a convoy. My father's silver SUV led the way, followed closely by a red truck I did not recognize, presumably belonging to the Millers, and then Brielle's compact car bringing up the rear. They pulled in with aggressive confidence, tires crunching loudly on the stones. The vehicles were packed to the roof. I saw kayaks strapped to the roof of the truck, a mountain of inflatable pool toys in the back of the SUV, and enough coolers to cater a wedding. They spilled out of the cars like an invading army. The noise was instantaneous. Doors slammed. Voices shouted over the hum of engines. The Millers' 2 Great Danes leaped out of the back of the truck, barking wildly and immediately running toward my flower beds. "God, look at them," Marcus muttered, watching the feed. "They really moved in, didn't they?" "They think they own the place," I said. "Technically, they think they own me, so by extension, they own the place." I watched Darlene exit the passenger side of the SUV. She was wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and a flowing caftan, dressed for the resort lifestyle she felt she deserved. She started pointing fingers, directing traffic. She gestured for my father to grab the heavy cooler. She pointed the Millers toward the guest cottage entrance. She was the general of this operation, and this was her beachhead. "Okay, let's get the perishables inside first." Darlene's voice drifted through the walls, muffled but audible. "Tessa, stop texting and grab the beach bags. Brielle, get the dog food." I stood up. "Showtime." "Do you want us to come to the door?" Marcus asked, standing up and crossing his arms. He looked imposing, a solid wall of muscle in a plain black t-shirt. "No," I said. "Stay here in the kitchen. I need them to see me alone first. I need them to realize that I'm not afraid." I walked to the living room, positioning myself just out of sight of the front windows. I could hear their footsteps thumping heavily on the wooden stairs leading up to the deck, the heavy tread of my father, the sharp, quick steps of Darlene. I heard the distinct jingle of keys. "I am so ready for a margarita," Darlene announced. "Warren, did you pack the blender in the blue bag or the green one?" "Green one," my father's voice replied, sounding strained under the weight of a cooler. Then came the sound. It was a metallic scratch, the sound of brass meeting hardened steel. Darlene was trying to insert her key into the lock. Silence followed. Then, the scratching sound came again, more aggressive this time. She was wiggling it, trying to force the old key into a keyway that no longer accepted it. The new locks I had installed were high-security cylinders with a completely different pin configuration. Her key might as well have been a toothpick. "What on earth?" Darlene muttered. "What is it?" my father asked. "The key is sticking," she said. "It won't go in. It is like there is something stuck in the hole." Here, let me try, my father said. I heard the thud of the cooler being set down on the deck. I imagined him wiping his brow, stepping up with that capable, fatherly air he put on when fixing minor inconveniences. He took the keys. I heard the same futile scratching. He tried to jam it. He tried to twist it. He jiggled the handle, rattling the entire door in its frame. That is strange, he said. It feels wrong. Did the lock get changed? Don't be ridiculous. Warren, Darlene snapped. Who would change the lock? Jada was just here to check on things. Maybe the humidity swelled the wood. Push on the door while I turn it. I watched the door handle dip and rise as they threw their weight against the wood. The deadbolt did not budge. It held firm, a silent sentinel of my new boundaries. This is unbelievable, Tessa's voice joined the chorus. Mom, it is hot out here. Can we get in? The key isn't working, Darlene shouted, her frustration spiking. Try the back door. Maybe she left the slider unlocked. She is so careless with security usually. I watched on the monitor as Tessa and Brielle ran around the side of the house toward the wraparound deck. The camera on the rear floodlight picked them up. Tessa grabbed the handle of the sliding glass door and yanked. Locked. I had engaged the secondary footlock and placed a wooden dowel in the track. It is locked too, Tessa yelled. Try the kitchen door, Darlene commanded. Now they were swarming the perimeter. They were like ants whose hill had been plugged. They tried the side door that led into the mudroom. Locked. My father even went to the small shed where we kept the life jackets, thinking perhaps there was a spare key hidden under the stone nearby. The stone was there. The key was gone. The confusion outside was rapidly fermenting into anger. The Millers were standing by their truck, looking awkward. The dogs were whining. The ice in the coolers was melting. Jada! Darlene's voice rang out, sharp and piercing. She had realized I must be inside. She had probably seen my car tucked away in the garage through the side window, or perhaps she just sensed it. Jada, are you in there? She came back to the front door. She didn't knock. She pounded. It was a rhythmic, demanding thud that shook the frame. Jada, open this door right now. I know you're in there. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the front of my shirt. I walked to the door. I unlocked the deadbolt with a loud, deliberate clack. I saw the handle turn immediately from the outside. They were trying to barge in the second the lock disengaged. But I had engaged the heavy-duty security chain. I opened the door 4 inches. The chain pulled taut, stopping the door with a metallic snap. Through the gap, I saw them. Darlene was red-faced, sweat beading on her upper lip. My father stood behind her, looking bewildered and sweaty. Tessa was behind him, looking annoyed. The heat from outside rushed in through the crack, contrasting with the cool air of the house. Darlene blinked, staring at the chain. She looked at my face, framed in the narrow opening. What is this? She demanded, gesturing to the chain. Why is the chain on? And why didn't the key work? We have been standing out here for 10 minutes. She made a move to push the door, but the chain held. Let us in, Jada. The ice cream is melting. I looked at her. I looked at my father, who was finally meeting my eyes. He looked confused, as if he couldn't process why the door wasn't opening wide to welcome him. You can't come in, I said. My voice was not loud. It was not shaking. It was the voice of a stranger. Excuse me? Darlene laughed, a short, incredulous bark. Stop playing games. This isn't funny. We have guests. Open the door. No, I said. Jada, my father stepped forward, putting his hand on the doorframe. Honey, what is going on? Did you change the lock? Yes, I said. Why would you do that without telling us? He asked, his voice taking on that tone of disappointed patience. We had to stand out here in the heat. Just undo the chain so we can unpack. You aren't unpacking, I said. Darlene's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? We have this planned for months. We have the Millers here. We have food for 10 days. Open the door. You said this was a vacation for a real family, I said, repeating her words from 2 nights ago with perfect diction. You made it very clear that I was not part of that definition. Oh, for God's sake! Darlene threw her hands up. Is this about that? Jada, don't be petty. We are here now. We can talk about your feelings later. Right now. We need to get the dogs inside. The dogs aren't coming inside, I said. And neither are you. This is ridiculous, Tessa shouted from the back. Jada, stop being a freak and open the door. This is my house, I said. My name is on the deed. My name is on the insurance. My name is on the mortgage. And as the owner, I am denying you entry. Darlene's face went from red to a pale, dangerous purple. She stepped closer to the crack in the door, lowering her voice to a hiss. You listen to me, she said. You open this door right now, or you are going to regret it. You do not treat your father like this. You do not embarrass us in front of our friends. You embarrassed yourselves when you assumed you could use my property after discarding me, I replied. I am going to break this door down, Darlene threatened, grabbing the handle and shaking it violently. The chain rattled but held. Warren, do something. Tell her. My father looked at me through the gap. Jada, please, you are making a scene. Just let us in, and we will work this out. There is nothing to work out, Dad, I said. You made your choice at dinner. You chose your real family. Now you can go take your real family somewhere else. We have nowhere else to go, he pleaded. Everything is booked. We drove 4 hours. That sounds like a problem for your travel agent, I said. Oh, wait, you didn't use one. You just used me. Jada, he shouted, losing his composure for the first time. Open this door. No, I said. I looked Darlene dead in the eye. I changed the locks, I said, delivering the words slowly, savoring the weight of them. And I am not giving you the new key. I saw the realization hit them. They weren't getting in. This wasn't a tantrum they could wait out. This wasn't a misunderstanding they could manipulate. This was a wall. You little bitch, Darlene spat, the mask of the loving stepmother dropping completely. Goodbye, I said. And then, with a firm, deliberate motion, I slammed the door in their faces. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I leaned my back against the cool wood of the door. My heart was hammering in my chest, beating a rhythm of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. Outside, the shouting erupted. Darlene was screaming. The dogs were barking. My father was banging his fist on the wood. But inside, it was cool. Inside, it was safe. Marcus walked into the hallway from the kitchen, holding a cold beer out to me. He had a grin on his face. That, he said, was the most rock and roll thing I have ever seen. I took the beer. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the massive release of tension that had been building for 20 years. They aren't leaving yet, I said, listening to the chaos outside. They are going to try to bully their way in. Let them try, Marcus said. I have 911 on speed dial. I took a sip of the beer. It tasted like victory. I walked back to the kitchen and looked at the monitor. Darlene was now on her phone, pacing aggressively in circles on the deck, while my father stood staring at the closed door as if he had never seen wood before. They were outside. I was inside. For the first time in my life, the geometry of our family had been corrected. The heavy oak door vibrated against my back, thudding with the rhythm of Darlene's fist. It was a violent, erratic sound, the percussion of a woman who had never been told no in her life and did not possess the emotional vocabulary to process it. Outside, the noise was a cacophony. The Miller's dogs were barking in a deep, booming cadence. Darlene was shouting my name. Tessa was screaming something unintelligible about heat stroke. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the conditioned air of the hallway. I looked at Marcus. He was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his expression one of grim satisfaction. He gave me a small nod, a silent signal that he had my back, but this was my arena. I turned around and unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door until the heavy security chain snapped taut again. The sliver of space revealed a chaotic tableau. Darlene was right there, her face pressed close to the gap, her makeup starting to run in the humidity. Her eyes were wide, manic, and furious. Behind her, my father was pacing, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. The Millers had retreated to the far side of the driveway, standing by their truck, looking at their phones as if hoping to teleport away from this domestic disaster. "Open this door!" Darlene screeched the moment she saw my face. She jammed her fingers into the gap, gripping the edge of the door as if she could pry it open by sheer force of will. "Do you have any idea what you are doing? Do you have any concept of the embarrassment you are causing us?" Her voice was high and shrill, cutting through the humid afternoon air. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. My voice was low, steady, and devoid of the tremor that used to be there whenever I confronted her. "I am protecting my house." "Protecting it from who?" she spat. "We are your family. These are our guests. You are acting like a lunatic. You are having some kind of mental break. Warren, tell her she is having a breakdown." "I am not having a breakdown, Darlene," I said. "I am having a breakthrough." Tessa pushed her way to the front, shoving her mother aside slightly. She looked hot, bothered, and incredibly entitled. She pointed a manicured finger at me through the crack. "We have been planning this for 6 months," she shouted. "We have the boat rental scheduled for tomorrow morning. We have reservations at the steakhouse for Saturday. You are ruining everything because you are upset about one dinner conversation? Grow up, Jada." "One dinner conversation," I repeated. I looked at Tessa, really looked at her. I saw the girl I had tutored in math, the girl I had driven to soccer practice, the girl who had taken my bedroom without asking and now stood on my porch demanding entry to my property. "You think this is about one conversation?" "It is about you being jealous," Tessa sneered. "It is always about you being jealous that you don't fit in." "No," I said. "It is about the fact that 3 days ago, right in my face, you and your mother defined the terms of this vacation. You said, quite clearly, that this trip was for a real family." I let the words hang there. I saw my father stop pacing. He froze, his back to me, his shoulders stiffening. "That was just a figure of speech," Darlene protested, though her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second. "You are twisting my words. I meant we wanted intimate family time. I didn't mean you weren't family. You are being semantic to justify being a bitch." "Semantic?" I asked. "You uninvited me. You told me to my face that my presence would ruin the vibe of a real family. You drew the circle, Darlene. You drew it with a Sharpie, and you left me on the outside." I leaned closer to the gap, my eyes locking onto hers. "I am respecting your definition. If this house is for the use of the Ramirez family, and you have determined that I am not part of the real version of that entity, then logic follows that you have no business being in my home." "This is not your home," Darlene shouted, losing her composure entirely. "It is the family lake house. It has always been the family lake house." "It is Jada Ramirez's house," I corrected. "Check the deed. Check the county records. Check the new locks." My father finally turned around. He walked up the steps, pushing past Darlene and Tessa. He looked old. The heat was flushing his face, but his eyes were pale and watery. He put his hand on the door, right below the chain. "Jada," he said, his voice pleading, dropping to that soft, intimate register he used when he wanted me to do him a favor. "Honey, please, don't do this. The Millers are watching. This is humiliating. Just let us in, and we can sit down and talk about this. We can fix this. I am sorry about what Darlene said. She didn't mean it like that." "She meant exactly like that, Dad," I said. "And you sat there. You stared at the tablecloth." "I was caught off guard," he lied. "I didn't know how to react. But we are here now. We are tired. Please, Jada, don't make this a war. Don't make this ugly." "I didn't start the war, Dad," I said. "I am just finishing it." "We are family," he insisted, grasping for the one lever he had always used to control me. "Family forgives. Family shares. You are my daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" This was the moment, the trap he always set, the guilt, the obligation, the idea that being a daughter meant endless, unreciprocated sacrifice. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let my mother's memory fade, who had let his new wife rewrite our history, who had watched me sleep on a couch for 10 years while strangers slept in my bed. If we are family, I asked, my voice cutting through the noise like a razor blade, then tell me, Dad, what am I? The question landed with the weight of an anvil. What? He stammered. You said this trip is for a real family. I said. You agreed with Darlene. You didn't speak up. You let her say I wasn't part of it. So, I am asking you now, in front of your wife, in front of your stepdaughters, in front of your neighbors, if you are the real family, what am I? The silence that followed was absolute. The dogs stopped barking. Darlene stopped shouting. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their buzzing. My father opened his mouth. He looked at Darlene. He saw the fury in her eyes, the warning that if he validated me, he would pay for it later. He looked at Tessa, who was rolling her eyes but listening. He looked back at me. He struggled. He wanted to say, "You are my daughter." He wanted to say, "You are the most important thing." But he couldn't, because if he said I was family, he admitted that he had allowed me to be treated like garbage. If he said I was family, he admitted he was a coward. He closed his mouth. He looked down at his shoes. He did not answer. The silence stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was agonizing, but it was also clarifying. It was the truth, finally stripped of all the polite fictions we had maintained for decades. That is what I thought, I said softly. I straightened up. I felt a profound sense of finality. The last thread connecting me to my need for his approval snapped. A guest, I said, answering for him. An inconvenience, a resource. That is what I am to you. I am the person who pays the taxes and scrubs the toilets, so you can play happy family with people who actually matter to you. Jada, that is not true, he started, but his voice was weak. It is true, I cut him off, and I am done. I looked at Darlene, whose face was a mask of shock. She had expected me to fold. She had expected the social pressure to break me. She had not calculated for a version of Jada who didn't care. Here is the new rule, I said, speaking clearly enough for the Millers to hear across the driveway. If you do not see me as family, you do not cross the threshold of my house, you do not sleep in my beds, you do not drink my wine, you do not use my dock. We have nowhere to go, Darlene screamed, desperation finally creeping in as the reality hit her. You can't leave us stranded. You are not stranded, I said. You are just not here. I reached for the door handle. Wait, Tessa yelled. My charger is inside. I left it here last time. I will mail it to you, I said. Jada, my father called out, his hand reaching through the gap as if to grab me. Jada, listen to me. No, Dad, I said. You listen. You wanted a vacation without me? You got it. I looked him in the eye one last time. Enjoy the motel. I pulled the door back. My father snatched his hand away just in time. I slammed the door shut. I threw the deadbolt. Clack. I re-engaged the secondary lock. Click. I stood there, staring at the wood. I could hear them screaming outside. I could hear Darlene kicking the door now. A futile, childish temper tantrum. I could hear my father trying to calm her down. She can't do this, Darlene was wailing. Call the police. She stole our vacation. I turned away from the door. Sarah was standing at the entrance to the kitchen. She was holding her phone up, recording. Did you get it? I asked. Every word, Sarah said, especially the part where your dad couldn't answer the question. That was brutal. It was necessary, I said. I walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa I usually slept on, but this time I wasn't sleeping on it. I was sitting on it as the owner of the house. On the security monitor, I watched the scene unravel. The Millers were getting back into their truck. The husband was shaking his head, clearly done with the drama. Darlene was on her phone, likely calling a locksmith who would tell her exactly what I had already known. High security locks, don't open for anyone but the owner. My father was standing alone on the porch, looking at the door. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He looked like a man who had just realized he had sold something priceless for a very cheap price. I watched him for a moment, waiting for a pang of guilt. I waited to feel bad for ruining his week. But all I felt was the cool air of the air conditioner and the quiet, steady beat of my own heart. The cord was cut. The anchor was lifted. I was free. I returned to the kitchen island and sat down in front of my laptop. The screen was a grid of 4 live video feeds, capturing the exterior of my home from every angle. It was a silent movie of a family imploding, and I was both the director and the audience. On the front porch camera, Darlene was no longer banging on the door. She had moved to the decorative planters I had filled with petunias just last month. With a scream that the microphone picked up as a distorted crackle, she kicked one of the heavy ceramic pots. It tipped over, spilling dark soil and crushed purple flowers across the pristine gray decking. "That is property damage," Sarah said, leaning over my shoulder, her voice cool and professional. "Save that clip." I moved the cursor and clicked Save. The file downloaded instantly to my hard drive. Evidence 01 Property Damage, MP4. "She is not going to stop," Marcus observed, pointing to the driveway camera. "She is winding herself up." He was right. Darlene was pacing back and forth in front of the cars, her arms waving wildly as she yelled at my father. My father was leaning against the hood of his SUV, his head in his hands. He looked defeated, but I felt no pity. His defeat was a direct result of his refusal to lead. I picked up my phone. I did not dial 911. That was for emergencies. And this, despite Darlene's histrionics, was not a life-or-death situation. It was a civil dispute involving trespassing. I dialed the non-emergency line for the Camden County Sheriff's Department. I had saved the number earlier that morning as part of my preparation. "Sheriff's Department, dispatch." A woman's voice answered after 2 rings. "Hello?" I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "My name is Jada Ramirez. I am the owner of the property located at 412 Oakwood Point. I would like to report a disturbance." "What kind of disturbance, ma'am?" "I have several individuals on my property who are refusing to leave after being denied entry," I stated. "They are banging on the doors, screaming, and have just destroyed some landscaping. I have the incident recorded on security cameras." "Are these individuals known to you?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," I said. "It is my father and his wife. They are angry because I am not allowing them to use my home for their vacation. I have asked them to leave, and they are refusing." "Is anyone armed? Is there any physical violence?" "No weapons," I said. "Just verbal aggression and property damage. I am inside with 2 guests, and the doors are locked. I do not feel in immediate physical danger, but I want a record of this incident, and I would like an officer to come by and formally escort them off the property if they do not leave soon." "I can send a deputy out," the dispatcher said. "It might be about 45 minutes. We have a few calls ahead of you." "That is fine," I said. "I just want it on the record." "I have logged the call. Ms. Ramirez, call back if they manage to breach the entry or if the situation escalates." "Thank you." I hung up. I did not go back to the door to taunt them. I did not yell out the window that the police were coming. I simply let the weight of the situation settle. On the screen, the dynamic was shifting. The Millers, the neighbors Darlene had invited to impress, had apparently seen enough. The husband, a tall man named Greg, was gesturing towards his truck. He said something to my father, shaking his head. I could read his body language clearly. He was embarrassed. This wasn't the Fun Lake weekend he had been promised. It was a front row seat to a dysfunctional family breakdown. I watched as Greg walked over to Darlene, who was mid-rant. He touched her arm, not affectionately, but with the firm grip of someone trying to interrupt a seizure. He pointed at his watch. He pointed at his truck. Darlene pulled her arm away, shouting something at him. Greg threw his hands up, turned around, and marched back to his vehicle. He whistled for his Great Danes, the dogs, sensing the tension. happily scrambled into the back seat. Mrs. Miller gave a small, awkward wave to the closed front door, a silent apology to the invisible homeowner, and got into the passenger seat. The red truck reversed, turned around in the gravel, and drove away. "There goes the audience," Marcus said dryly. Darlene watched them go, her mouth hanging open. The loss of her guests seemed to hurt her more than the locked door, without witnesses to perform for. Her rage lost some of its fuel, but it became more concentrated, more venomous. She turned back to the house. She walked right up to the doorbell camera. Staring directly into the lens, she knew I was watching. Her face was distorted by the fisheye effect, making her look like a caricature of hatred. "You are so selfish," she screamed, enunciating every syllable. "You have always been selfish. You take, and the one time we ask for something, you do this. You are going to die alone. Jada, do you hear me? Alone." I sat there, sipping my iced tea. Her words, which once would have made me curl up in a ball and cry, now just sounded like noise. It was the sound of a toddler who had been told they could not have ice cream for dinner. "Selfish," I whispered to myself, testing the word. For 32 years, I had been selfless. I had given my time, my money, my silence, and my dignity, and it had gotten me nothing but a folding chair at the kids' table. If protecting my boundaries made me selfish, then I would wear that label like a badge of honor. I did not activate the two-way intercom. I did not give her the satisfaction of a response. I just watched. My father walked up behind her. He put his hands on her shoulders. He said something low. She tried to shake him off, but he held on. He pointed to the car. He pointed down the road. He looked at the camera too, but his expression was different. It was regret mixed with fear. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the bridge was not just burned, it was detonated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually only 20 minutes, the fight drained out of them. The heat, the humiliation, and the silence from the house had done their work. Darlene spat on my porch, a final, petty act of disrespect. Then she turned on her heel and marched to the SUV. My father lingered for 1 second longer. He raised his hand as if to knock again, then dropped it. He turned and walked away. I watched them get into the car. I watched the reverse lights flare. I watched them back out, kicking up dust, and drive away down the lane, following the same path the Millers had taken. "They are gone," Sarah said, letting out a long breath. "For now," I corrected. I saved 3 more clips. Evidence 02 verbal harassment, MP4. Evidence 03 departure, MP4. "Okay," I said, standing up and closing the laptop. "Let's make dinner." The evening that followed was surreal. For years, my nights at the lake house had been spent serving others. I would be in the kitchen chopping vegetables while Darlene drank wine on the deck. I would be cleaning up the dishes while they played board games. Tonight, the dynamic was inverted. Marcus insisted on grilling the steaks. Sarah made a salad. We sat on the deck as the sun went down, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. We opened a bottle of wine, not the cheap stuff I usually bought for the family gatherings, but a nice Cabernet Sarah had brought. We laughed. We talked about Sarah's cases. We talked about Marcus's gym. We listened to the crickets chirping in the woods. The house felt different. It felt lighter. It felt like it was finally breathing after holding its breath for a decade. "To the new landlord," Marcus toasted, raising his glass. "To boundaries," Sarah added, clinking her glass against mine. "To boundaries," I repeated, taking a sip. The wine was rich and smooth. The steak was perfect. The company was genuine. This was what the house was supposed to be. This was what my mother had intended. A place of joy. A place of rest. But even as I laughed at Marcus's story about a client who tried to lift weights in denim jeans, a small, cold knot remained in my stomach. I knew my family. I knew Darlene. She was not the type to retreat and lick her wounds. She was the type to regroup and counterattack. She would spin this narrative to anyone who would listen. She would tell the extended family I had gone crazy. She would tell them I was abusive. And more than that, I knew my father, or rather, I knew his finances. Later that night, after Sarah and Marcus had gone to the guest room, the actual guest room, with the comfortable bed and the lake view, I stayed up. I sat in the living room, the moonlight streaming in through the sliding glass doors. I had won the battle for the physical house. I had the keys. I had the police report number. I had the video evidence. But Darlene's words at the dinner table 3 nights ago came back to me. We need to maximize the space. We need a vacation. Things have been tight. My father had retired 2 years ago. His pension was decent, but Darlene had expensive tastes. They had just remodeled their kitchen. They had leased 2 new cars, and yet they were desperate for a free vacation. Desperate enough to pack 10 people into a 3-bedroom cabin. Why was the free aspect so critical? I opened my laptop again. The glow of the screen was harsh in the dark room. I didn't go to the security feed this time. I went to my credit monitoring service. I had frozen my credit years ago after a data breach at a retail store, but I occasionally unlocked it when I was applying for a new card or a car loan. I tried to remember if I had locked it back up after I bought my car last year. I logged in. The dashboard loaded. My score was excellent, 780. But then I saw an alert in the inquiries section. New hard inquiry. Midwest Mortgage Solutions. Dated 2 weeks ago. I frowned. I hadn't applied for a mortgage. I hadn't applied for anything. I clicked on the details. The inquiry was for a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. You can't take out a HELOC on a house you don't own, unless you claim you own it, or unless you have someone pretending to be the owner. I thought about the email my father had asked for 6 months ago, the deed, the tax assessment, the insurance documents. Darlene was looking into bundling our insurance policies. That was the lie. They hadn't just wanted a vacation, they wanted the equity. The lake house was paid off. It was worth at least $400,000 in the current market, to a couple drowning in debt. My house wasn't just a getaway, it was a piggy bank. I sat there in the dark, the silence of the lake house suddenly feeling very loud. The eviction today hadn't just embarrassed them, it had likely ruined a closing date. I closed the laptop. My hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was rage, pure, white-hot rage. They hadn't just tried to erase me from the family. They were trying to erase my future. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play with paper? Let's play." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the dark water. The revenge wasn't over. It was just moving from the front porch to the courthouse. And if they thought the locked door was bad, they had no idea what was coming next. The morning sun reflecting off the lake was deceptive. It promised tranquility, a soft start to a weekend that I had violently reclaimed. However, the peace was shattered at exactly 9 in the morning by a notification on my phone. I was sitting on the deck with a mug of black coffee, watching a heron pick its way through the reeds, when the email arrived. The subject line was innocuous enough. Urgent. Final verification required for loan application number 4589. I frowned, setting my coffee down on the glass table. I assumed it was phishing, the kind of spam that floods every inbox, trying to panic you into clicking a malicious link. But something about the sender address gave me pause. It was not a random string of characters. It was from a legitimate domain belonging to Midwest Mortgage Solutions, the same company that had pinged my credit report. I opened the email. Dear Ms. Ramirez, we are finalizing the underwriting for your home equity line of credit on the property at 412 Oakwood Point. We just need you to upload a clearer copy of your driver's license. As the scan provided was slightly blurry, please attend to this immediately to ensure funds are disbursed by Tuesday as requested. My stomach dropped. It felt as though the deck had suddenly tilted beneath my feet. Funds disbursed by Tuesday. That was 3 days away. Sarah, I said. My voice was calm, but it had a hollow quality that made my friend look up instantly from her book. What is it? She asked, marking her page. Come look at this. She walked over and leaned down to read the screen. Her lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the text, checking the headers. "That is real," she said. "That is a real loan officer. Did you apply for a HELOC?" "No," I said. "I have zero debt on this house. I intend to keep it that way." "Call them," Sarah commanded. "Right now. Put it on speaker." I dialed the number listed in the email signature. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was financial violence. A man answered on the second ring. "Midwest Mortgage. This is Kevin." "Hi, Kevin," I said, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "This is Jada Ramirez. I just received an email from you regarding an application for 412 Oakwood Point." "Oh, excellent." Kevin's voice was cheerful, the sound of a man about to close a deal. "Thanks for calling back so quickly. Ms. Ramirez, we are really close to the finish line here. I just need that ID, and we can wire the funds. $150,000, cash out, variable rate, just like we discussed." $150,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. That was nearly half the value of the home. That was enough to pay off my father's new cars, Darlene's kitchen remodel, and probably fund a year of luxury vacations. "Kevin," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I did not apply for this loan." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The typing I had heard in the background stopped. "Excuse me?" Kevin asked, his tone shifting from sales to confusion. "I have the signed application right here. I have the deed. I have the trust documents. I have the power of attorney." "Power of attorney?" I asked, looking at Sarah. She shook her head vigorously, mouthing the word fraud. "I never signed a power of attorney," I told him. "And I never signed an application. You are processing a fraudulent loan." "Ma'am, with all due respect," Kevin said, his voice cooling considerably. "Everything was submitted through our secure portal. The initial inquiry came from the email address on file. The documents look authentic." "What email address?" Sarah whispered loudly. "Kevin, what email address are you communicating with?" I asked. "It is the one on the application," he said, sounding defensive now. JadaRamirezOfficial@gmail.com. I let out a sharp breath. "My email is jada.ramirez@northbridge.com, or my personal one, which is JadaR88. I do not own Jada Ramirez Official." "Well," Kevin stammered, "I have been corresponding with someone at that address for 3 weeks. They sent over the tax assessments and the insurance binder." The tax assessments, the insurance binder, the documents I had scanned and emailed to my father 6 months ago. The pieces clicked together with a sickening precision. My father hadn't just been passive. He had been a conduit. He had harvested my data and handed it to Darlene like a weapon. "Kevin," I said, "I am recording this call. I am the legal owner of the property. I am currently occupying the property. If you disperse 1 cent of those funds, I will sue your institution for negligence and facilitation of identity theft. Cancel the application. Flag it for fraud. Right now." I will have to speak to my manager," Kevin said, panic creeping into his voice. "I will put a hold on it." "You do that," I said, "and I want you to forward the entire application package, including the IP addresses of the sender, to my attorney. She is sitting right next to me." I gave him Sarah's professional email address. I hung up. I sat back, feeling physically ill. The betrayal was so total, so comprehensive, that it made me dizzy. It wasn't just that they didn't love me. It was that they viewed me as a resource to be stripped mined. "Okay," Sarah said, taking charge. "We need to move fast. Freeze everything." I opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Fueled by a cold, efficient fury, I logged into Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. I placed a security freeze on all 3. I set up a fraud alert that required a phone call to my personal cell number before any new credit could be extended. Then, Sarah's phone pinged. "Kevin sent the file," she said. "That was fast. He is scared." She opened the PDF attachment. We huddled around her screen. There it was, an application for a home equity line of credit. In the applicant's signature box was a scrawl that looked vaguely like mine, but too looped, too practiced. It looked like someone had traced a signature from a birthday card. And there was the power of attorney. It was a forgery, plain and simple. It claimed that I, Jada Ramirez, granted Warren Ramirez the authority to make financial decisions regarding the property. The notary stamp looked blurry, likely lifted from another document and photoshopped in. "Look at the contact info," Sarah pointed out, scrolling down to the applicant details section. The phone number listed wasn't mine. It wasn't my father's either. "That is a burner number," Marcus said, looking over our shoulders. "Or maybe a secondary line." "And the email," Sarah said, JadaRamirezOfficial@gmail.com. "I bet I know who that is," I said. I opened a new tab. I went to the password recovery page for Gmail. I typed in the address, Jada Ramirez Official. I clicked Forgot Password. Google prompted me, "Get a verification code texted to phone number ending in 44. I stared at the screen. My father's number ended in 12. Darlene's ended in 99. Tessa's ended in 05. "Who ends in 44? Sarah asked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I stopped at Brielle. "Brielle cell 555-392-8444. "It is Brielle," I said, the realization hitting me like a slap. "My little sister, the one who wanted to bring her boyfriend for a fun weekend. She set up the fake email." "She is 22, Sarah said, disgusted. "She is old enough to know that is a felony." "Darlene put her up to it," I said, my voice flat. "Darlene is the architect. Brielle is just the tech support. Dad provided the documents. It was a family project, a group effort to rob me." It all made sense now. The vacation wasn't just about swimming and boating. It was about being physically present in the house when the appraiser came by, or perhaps to intercept any mail from the bank. They needed to be the owners for a week to finalize the theft. That was why Darlene had been so desperate to keep me away. That was why they needed a real family vacation, because I was the only person who could spot the lie. My father's silence at the dinner table wasn't just cowardice, it was guilt. He knew what they were doing. He knew that while I was eating his roast chicken, they were actively processing paperwork to put a lien on my inheritance. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away instantly. "I am going to destroy them," I said. "Not with a bat, not with a scream, with paper." "This is wire fraud," Sarah said, her lawyer face fully on. "This is conspiracy to commit bank fraud. This is identity theft. Jada, if we turn this over to the police, they go to prison, not metaphorical prison, actual federal prison." I looked out at the lake. I thought about my father. I thought about him teaching me to ride a bike. I thought about him sitting at the table, letting Darlene call me an outsider. "I don't want them in prison yet," I said. "I want them exposed. I want them to realize that the person they thought was weak is actually the one holding the gavel." "So what is the play?" Marcus asked. "We gather everything," I said. "We build the file. I want the IP logs from the bank. I want the metadata from the email Brielle created. I want the timestamp on the digital signature." I turned to Sarah. "Can you draft a legal hold letter? Something that compels the bank to preserve all records?" "I can have it done in 20 minutes, Sarah said. "Do it." I stood up and walked to the printer in the corner of the room. I printed the fraudulent application. I printed the fake power of attorney. I printed the email from Kevin. As the pages slid out of the tray, warm and crisp, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The Jada who wanted her father's love was gone. She had packed her bags and left the moment she saw that phone number ending in 44. The woman standing here now was an investigator. She was a plaintiff. I picked up the stack of papers. It was thick. It was heavy. It was a weapon. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from my father. "Dad, Jada, please call me. Darlene is really upset. We are staying at a motel in Osage Beach. It is costing a fortune. We just want to come talk." I looked at the message. It is costing a fortune. Even now. His concern was money, not his daughter's feelings, not the crime they had committed, just the cost of the motel. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text and emailed it to Sarah to add to the file. He wants to talk, I told them. Don't, Sarah said. Oh, I won't, I said. Not until I have enough evidence to bury them. And when we do talk, it won't be at a kitchen table. It will be in a deposition. I walked back to the deck. The heron was gone. The water was chopping up as the wind rose. A storm was coming in over the hills. Dark clouds gathering in the west. It felt appropriate. I sat down and watched the clouds roll in. I was done being the victim. I was done being the stepchild. I was the witness, the judge, and the jury, and court was now in session. The text message from my father came at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. It was brief, stripped of the emojis he usually overused to feign enthusiasm. Can we meet? Alone? Just coffee? I need to explain. I showed the phone to Sarah. She was already awake, reviewing the fraudulent loan application with a highlighter in hand. Do not go alone, she advised, not looking up from the paper. He is desperate. Desperate people make bad choices. I need to look him in the eye, I said. I need to hear him say it. But I will meet him in public. There is a diner on the highway, about 5 miles from here. It is crowded with tourists this time of year. He won't try anything there. Keep your recorder running, Marcus added from the kitchen, where he was making toast. And if he starts gaslighting you, walk away. I arrived at the diner 15 minutes early. I wanted to choose the table. I picked a booth in the back corner, positioning myself so I was facing the door. I wanted to see him coming. I wanted to control the geometry of the interaction. When my father walked in, the bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a stark contrast to the slump of his shoulders. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 24 hours. His polo shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were puffy. He scanned the room, and when he saw me, he offered a weak, tentative smile that made my stomach turn. It was the smile he used when he had forgotten my birthday, a smile that begged for preemptive forgiveness. He slid into the booth opposite me. He reached across the table as if to take my hand. I pulled my hands back and placed them in my lap. He flinched. He retracted his hand and wrapped it around the paper menu instead. Jada, he started. His voice was rough. Thank you for coming. I know yesterday was a mess. Darlene gets so worked up. You know how she is. I am not here to talk about Darlene's temper, I said. The waitress appeared, and I ordered a black coffee. My father ordered the same. I waited until she left before speaking again. I am here because you said you needed to explain. He sighed, rubbing his face with both hands. Look, honey, I am sorry about the real family comment. That was wrong. We were just stressed. The trip, the planning, the heat. It just came out wrong. You are my daughter. You are always family. It was the apology I had craved for 3 days, but hearing it now, it sounded tinny. It sounded like a currency that had been devalued to 0. You sat there, I said. You sat there and let her say it. You sat there and let her lock me out of the trip. But that is not actually what we need to discuss, is it? I don't know what you mean, he said, avoiding my eyes. He began tearing the corner of a sugar packet. I think you do, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of the loan application signature page. I slid it across the laminate table. It stopped right in front of his coffee cup. Midwest Mortgage Solutions, I said. Application number 4589, $150,000. My father stopped tearing the sugar packet. He looked down at the paper. He didn't gasp. He didn't look shocked. He just went very still. You know about this, I stated. It wasn't a question. He was silent for a long moment. Then he looked up, and for the first time, there was no charm in his eyes, just a weary resignation. We were going to pay it back, he said. The admission hit me harder than I expected, even though I knew the facts. Hearing him admit to the crime with such casual logic felt like a physical blow. Pay it back? I repeated. You were taking out a lien on my house. My house. Dad, without telling me, how are you planning to pay back $150,000? You are retired. I have an investment coming through, he mumbled. And Darlene, she has some money coming from a settlement. We just needed a bridge, just for a few months. We were going to pay it off before you even knew it happened. Before I knew? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. So the plan was to commit fraud, steal my equity, and hope I didn't notice a massive lien on my title? Who signed my name? Dad? Was it you? Or was it Brielle? He winced at Brielle's name. Don't drag the girls into this. It was my idea. I know Brielle set up the email, I said coldly. We traced it, but that is not the point. The point is, you had to give them the documents, the deed, the insurance, the tax assessment. I leaned forward. When you asked me for those papers 6 months ago, you said Darlene was trying to get me a discount. You lied to me. You were planning this back in January. It wasn't a lie, exactly, he said, shifting in his seat. We were looking at finances. We realized how much equity was sitting in that lake house. It is just sitting there. Jada, you don't use it. You have your job. You have your apartment. You are doing fine. I am doing fine, I repeated slowly. So that makes it okay to steal from me? It is not stealing, he hissed, keeping his voice low so the other diners wouldn't hear. It is family resources. Your mother, she would have wanted us to be comfortable. She wouldn't have wanted us drowning in debt while you sat on a $500,000 asset. Don't you dare speak for my mother, I said. My voice shook with a sudden spike of rage. She left that house to me specifically so I wouldn't be dependent on anyone, specifically so I would be safe. Safe, he scoffed lightly. You are 32. Jada, you are safe. But look at us. Darlene is stressed about the car payments. The girls have student loans. We are drowning. And I honestly thought you wouldn't mind. He looked at me with a terrifyingly genuine confusion. I thought if I asked, you might say no because you are so rigid about rules, he continued. But I knew if we just did it, and fixed it later, you would understand. You always help. You are the responsible one. You are the one who doesn't need as much. I stared at him. The truth was finally laid bare on the table, uglier and more honest than any insult Darlene could have screamed. He didn't hate me. He just didn't view me as a person with needs. To him, I was a utility. I was a safety net. I was the default sacrifice. In his mind, my role in the family was to absorb the damage so the real family, Darlene, Tessa, Brielle, could live comfortably. My assets were their backup plan. My compliance was assumed. You thought I would yield, I said quietly. You thought I would just take it, like I took the couch, like I took the insults. I thought you loved us, he said. A manipulation, pure and simple. I did love you, I said. That is why this hurts. But you don't love me. Dad, you love what I can provide for you. I reached into my bag again. This time, I pulled out a document Sarah had drafted on her laptop that morning. It was a formal affidavit of non-interest and a cease and desist regarding the property. I am not going to yield this time, I said. I placed the document on top of the signature page. What is this? He asked, looking at the legal jargon. This is a statement, I explained. It says that you have no legal claim to the property at 412 Oakwood Point. It says that you did not have my permission to apply for any loans. It says that you will immediately cease all attempts to use my identity or my assets. I took a pen out of my purse and set it down. I want you to sign it, now. He looked at the paper, then at me. Jada, this is ridiculous. We don't need lawyers. We can just cancel the loan. I will call them on Monday. You will call them today, I said. And you will sign this, because if you don't, I am leaving here and driving straight to the sheriff's office to file a report for identity theft and wire fraud, and I will give them Brielle's name too. His face went pale. You wouldn't put your sister in jail. She is not my sister, I said. She is the woman who created a fake email address to help you rob me, and I am not the sister who covers for everyone anymore. I am the victim of a crime. Choose, Dad, pen or police. He stared at me. He was looking for the crack in the armor. He was looking for the little girl who just wanted her daddy to be proud of her. He was looking for the Jada who would apologize for making him uncomfortable. She wasn't there. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. "I can't believe you are doing this," he muttered. "Over money." "It is not about the money," I said. "It is about the fact that you felt entitled to it." He signed the document. It was a messy scrawl, angry and jagged. He pushed the paper back to me. "Are you happy?" he asked, bitter voice. "No," I said honestly. "I am heartbroken, but I am protected." I took the paper and checked the signature. I folded it carefully and put it back in my bag. I stood up. "You need to pay for the coffees," I said. "Jada," he said as I slid out of the booth. "What happens now? With the family?" I looked down at him. He looked small in the booth. A man whose entire strategy of life relied on people being too polite to call him out. "I don't know," I said. "But as far as I am concerned, the real family is your problem now. Do not call me unless it is an emergency. A real emergency, not a financial one." "You are being cold," he said. "I am being clear," I replied. "There is a difference." I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I walked out of the diner into the blinding bright sunlight of the parking lot. The humidity hit me like a wall. But I didn't mind. I felt lighter. I had walked into that diner a daughter hoping for an explanation. I walked out a woman who had just negotiated the terms of her own freedom. I got into my car and locked the door. I took a deep breath. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Sarah, how did it go?" I typed back. "He signed? He admitted everything." "Sarah, good. Come home. We have mimosas." I put the car in gear. I wasn't going home to my apartment in the city. I was going back to the lake house. My house. The one place where I finally understood exactly who I was and what I was worth. The weekend storm had washed away the humidity, leaving the Monday morning air crisp and clear, while my father and Darlene were likely checking out of their overpriced motel, nursing hangovers and grudges. I was turning my dining room table into a command center for legal warfare. The emotional heaviness of the confrontation at the diner had dissipated, replaced by the cool, energizing hum of strategic execution. I started with the certified mail. I had drafted formal notices against trespass for Darlene, Tessa, and Brielle. These were not handwritten notes. They were legal documents citing the specific Missouri statutes regarding private property and criminal trespassing. I included a copy of the deed, highlighting my name in neon yellow. I drove to the post office at 9 o'clock in the morning and sent them with return receipts requested. When they signed for these letters, they would be creating a legal paper trail acknowledging that they had been warned. If they ever stepped foot on my gravel driveway again, it would not be a family dispute. It would be an arrestable offense. Next came the utilities. I spent an hour on the phone with the electric company and the water district. I instituted a strict privacy protocol on both accounts. From now on, any caller attempting to discuss the bill or report an outage would have to provide a 6-digit PIN that only I knew. I removed my father's name from the history logs entirely. I wanted to ensure that Darlene could not call up, claim to be Mrs. Ramirez, and shut off my power out of spite. But my most significant move was hiring the mercenaries. I did not want to spend my life guarding this house. I had a job in St. Louis. I had a life. I needed a proxy who was immune to emotional manipulation. I found a company called Lakefront Premier Management. They were expensive, taking 20% of any rental income and a flat monthly fee for security monitoring. But their reputation was ruthless. I met with their representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen, at noon. I handed her the keys and the security codes. "I need total lockdown," I told her. "I am not renting it out commercially yet, but I want your vacant home package, weekly inspections, storm checks, and most importantly, I want you to be the point of contact for any service providers. No one gets on this property without a work order signed by you." "We can do that," Karen said, tapping on her tablet. We also offer a 24-hour response to security alarms. If that doorbell camera triggers and you are in the city, we send a patrol car. Sign me up, I said. I signed the contract electronically. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a small but authoritative sign was planted at the end of my driveway. Managed by Lakefront Premier. Trespassers will be prosecuted. It was a shield. It was a barrier. And it took less than 3 hours for Darlene to run face first into it. I was back in the house, packing up the last of my things to return to the city, when my phone rang. It was Karen from the management company. "Ms. Ramirez," she said, her voice amused. "We just had a very interesting phone call on our main line." "Let me guess," I said. "A woman claiming to be me?" "Close," Karen said. "She claimed to be the owner, Mrs. Ramirez. She was quite frantic. She said there had been a terrible mistake and that she wanted to cancel the management contract immediately because she needed to get into the house to retrieve her. I believe she said heart medication." I laughed. Darlene didn't have a heart condition. She had a Chardonnay condition. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Well, we record all our calls for quality assurance," Karen said. "I asked her for the security pin you set up 3 hours ago. She obviously didn't have it. She started screaming that she was going to sue us. Then she hung up." "Can you send me that recording?" I asked. "For my records?" "Already in your inbox," Karen replied. I opened the file on my phone. Hearing Darlene's voice trying to impersonate an owner, trying to impersonate me, was deeply satisfying. She sounded desperate. She sounded like a trapped animal realizing the cage was made of reinforced steel. Evidence 04. Impersonation attempt, MP3. I added it to the folder. But Darlene, realizing she had lost the legal and physical battle, decided to shift the battlefield to the court of public opinion. She went for the one thing she thought she could still destroy, my reputation. On Tuesday evening, back in my apartment in St. Louis, my phone began to buzz with a different kind of notification. It wasn't banks or lawyers. It was family. My Aunt Rosa, my father's older sister, was the matriarch of the extended Ramirez clan. She lived in Chicago and usually only called for weddings and funerals. "Rosa calling." I answered. "Hi, Aunt Rosa." "Jada." Her voice was stern, vibrating with that specific disappointment older relatives reserve for scandals. "I just got off the phone with Darlene. I am shaking. I cannot believe what I'm hearing." "What did she tell you, Rosa?" I asked calmly, putting the call on speaker so I could continue typing an email to my attorney. "She said you had a psychotic break," Rosa cried. "She said you invited them down for a family reunion, and then when they arrived, you locked them out and laughed at them. She said poor Warren had to sleep in his car because you stole the vacation money he gave you. She said you are off your medication." The lie was breathless in its audacity. She had inverted the entire narrative. In her version, I was the unstable villain, and she was the victim of my madness. She had even added the detail about stealing vacation money to cover the financial hole they were in. She said Brielle is traumatized. Rosa continued, "Jada, honey, if you are having mental health issues, you need to tell us. You cannot treat your father like this. He is elderly." "He is 62, Rosa, not 90, I said, "and I am perfectly sane." "Then why would you do such a cruel thing?" Rosa demanded. "Darlene said you were screaming at invisible people. She is worried you might be a danger to yourself. She wants us to stage an intervention." An intervention, that was Darlene's play. If she could paint me as incompetent, she could perhaps challenge my control over the trust or the property later. It was a vicious, calculated move. "Aunt Rosa," I said, my voice steady, "I want you to check your email. I am sending you something right now." "I don't want to read your excuses," Rosa snapped. "It is not an excuse," I said. "It is a PDF. Just open it, please, for the sake of the family." I hit send. The file contained 3 things. First, the video clip of Darlene screaming, "You are selfish," and kicking my flower pot. Second, the fraudulent loan application with the fake signature. And third, the cease and desist document my father had signed at the diner, where he admitted to the unauthorized use of my property. "I am waiting," I said. I heard the click of a mouse on Rosa's end, then silence. Long, heavy silence. "That video," Rosa whispered after a minute. "Is that Darlene?" "Yes," I said. "Does that look like I am the one screaming?" "And this loan paper," Rosa stammered. $150,000? Midwest Mortgage?" "Read the signature, Rosa. It is not mine. And look at the document below it, the one Dad signed yesterday." I heard her reading the legal text. Warren Ramirez, acknowledged that I attempted to secure financing using Jada Ramirez's property without her consent. "Madre de Dios," Rosa breathed. The anger in her voice evaporated, replaced by pure shock. "He signed this? Warren admitted to this?" "He had to," I said, "because the alternative was me calling the FBI. Darlene didn't tell you that part, did she? She didn't tell you that they tried to mortgage my house to pay off their debts? She didn't tell you that Brielle forged my email address?" "Brielle?" Rosa sounded like she was going to faint. "But she is just a baby." "She is an accomplice," I said. "Darlene is lying to you. Rosa. She is lying to everyone to cover up a felony. I didn't lock them out because I'm crazy. I locked them out because they are thieves." I need to sit down," Rosa said. "Jada, I am so sorry." She sounded so convincing. She was crying. "She is good at crying," I said. "But documents don't cry. Aunt Rosa, documents just tell the truth." "I am going to call her back," Rosa said, her voice hardening into a tone I recognized. It was the tone of the matriarch preparing to dispense justice. "And then I am going to call your father. This is shameful. This is a sin." "You do that," I said. "And please, feel free to forward that PDF to anyone else Darlene has called. I believe Cousin Maria and Uncle Luis probably got the same sob story." "I will handle it," Rosa promised. "You have my word. Nobody is going to think you are the crazy one. Not after I am done." She hung up. I sat back in my chair. I didn't need to make the calls myself. I had just weaponized the most powerful communication network in existence. The disappointed Hispanic aunt. By tomorrow morning, every cousin, second cousin, and godparent from Chicago to Texas would know that Warren and Darlene had tried to rob an orphan. The fallout was immediate. 2 hours later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then came a text. "Dad, Rosa just called. She is furious. She told the whole family. Why did you send her that paper? You promised not to go to the police." I texted back, "I didn't go to the police. I went to the family. You are the one who let Darlene lie about me. I just corrected the record." He didn't reply to that. He couldn't. But the final blow, the one that truly signaled the end of their siege, came the next morning. I received an email from the Guardian Property Services portal. It was an incident report. Incident: unauthorized access attempt. Time: 8:45 a. Details: individual identified as Warren Ramirez attempted to access the property using a locksmith. Patrol arrived on scene. Individual was informed that he is not on the authorized access list. Individual produced a key, but locks have been changed. Individual was issued a verbal warning and escorted off the premises. He had tried one last time. He had tried to sneak in, perhaps to retrieve something, or perhaps just to prove that he could, and he had been stopped not by his daughter, but by a uniformed security guard who didn't care about his feelings. I looked at the report. My father, a man who prided himself on his respectability, had been escorted off his daughter's property like a common criminal. He finally understood. The seriousness of the situation wasn't just about a missed vacation or a canceled loan. It was about a total, irreversible loss of power. He had no key. He had no credit. He had no reputation. And he had no daughter to clean up the mess. I forwarded the incident report to Sarah with a note. Add it to the file. Then I closed my laptop. I had a meeting with my boss in 10 minutes to discuss a promotion. I smoothed my skirt, checked my reflection in the mirror, and smiled. I looked like a woman who was in complete control of her assets, her narrative, and her life. The revenge wasn't loud anymore. It was silent, systemic, and absolute. And it was perfect. I thought the war was over. I thought the cease and desist letter, the humiliated exit from the driveway, and the exposure to the extended family would be enough to silence them. But I had underestimated the sheer, blinding delusion of a woman who believes the world owes her a living. Darlene was not just greedy, she was desperate, and desperate people do not retreat. They double down. It was Saturday, exactly 1 week after the original vacation was supposed to begin. I was at the lake house, not to relax, but to meet with a contractor about installing a permanent security gate at the end of the driveway. Sarah and Marcus had returned to the city, so I was alone. The house was quiet, the only sound being the gentle lapping of the water against the dock. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a black sedan turned into the driveway. It was not my father's SUV. It was a luxury car, but an older model, the kind that tries too hard to look expensive. Darlene was in the passenger seat. Driving was a man I had never seen before, slicked back hair, a suit that was a shade too shiny, and a gold watch that caught the sun. They got out. Darlene was wearing a business suit, a stark contrast to her usual resort wear. She carried a clipboard. She looked officious, determined, and terrifyingly confident. I walked out onto the deck, phone in hand. I had already dialed 911, but had not yet hit send. "Good morning, Jada," Darlene called out, her voice sickly sweet. She walked up the steps as if she hadn't screamed at me on this very spot 7 days ago. "We are just here to do a quick walkthrough." "Walkthrough for what?" I asked, standing at the top of the stairs, blocking the path. "For the sale," the man said. He stepped forward, extending a hand. "I am Robert Thorne. I am representing the investors who are interested in the property. Your mother tells me we can list this for a quick cash close." My mother. The blood boiled in my veins, hot and fast. "My mother is dead," I said, ignoring his hand. "And this woman is not the owner." "Jada, stop it," Darlene hissed, her smile faltering. "Robert knows the situation. He knows about the trust. We just need to show him the master bedroom so he can sign off on the valuation. Your father already agreed to the price." "My father has no authority here," I said, "and neither do you." "I have a signed listing agreement," Robert said, pulling a paper from his jacket pocket. "Signed by Warren Ramirez, authorized agent." "That authorization is a forgery," I said. "And if you step 1 foot closer, I am pressing charges for trespassing and fraud." "She is just being difficult," Darlene said quickly, grabbing Robert's arm. "She is the stepdaughter. She is bitter. Just ignore her. We have the key." She reached into her purse and pulled out a key. It was obviously a new copy of the old key, the one that didn't work. She must have gone to a hardware store and convinced herself that if she just tried hard enough, reality would bend to her will. "Robert," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a siren, "I am going to save you a lot of trouble. I am the sole owner. I have the deed right here." I held up the folder I now carried everywhere. "And," I continued, "I am calling the police." I tapped the call button. I put it on speaker. 911, what is your emergency?" "This is Jada Ramirez at 412 Oakwood Point," I said, locking eyes with Darlene. "I have 2 trespassers on my property attempting to facilitate a fraudulent real estate transaction. One of them is aggressive." "Officers are already in the area, ma'am," the dispatcher said. "We had a patrol nearby. They will be there in 2 minutes." Robert froze. He looked at Darlene. He looked at the phone. He looked at the no trespassing sign that Lakefront Premier Management had installed. "You said you had the title cleared," Robert said to Darlene, his voice dropping an octave. "I do," Darlene shrieked. "Warren is the patriarch. He controls the assets. She is just a child." A sheriff's cruiser, the same one that had escorted my father off the property days earlier, pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. 2 deputies stepped out. "What is going on here?" the first deputy asked, hand resting near his belt. Officer, I said, walking down the steps to meet them. I am the owner. This is my deed. I handed him the paperwork. These people are attempting to sell my house without my consent. This man claims to be a broker. The deputy looked at the deed. He looked at Robert. Sir, let me see your real estate license, the deputy demanded. Robert turned pale. He started patting his pockets. I left my wallet in the car. I am not a broker. Exactly. I am a wholesaler. I connect buyers and sellers. He is a scammer, I said, and he is trespassing. I didn't know. Robert threw his hands up, backing away from Darlene as if she were radioactive. She told me she was the wife of the owner. She showed me a power of attorney. A forged power of attorney, I corrected. The deputy turned to Darlene. Ma'am, we have a report on file about you. You were warned not to return. I have a right to be here, Darlene screamed. The facade of the businesswoman crumbled, revealing the chaotic, spiteful mess underneath. We need the money. Do you understand? We need the money. We promised the investors. You promised investors proceeds from a house you do not own? The deputy asked, his eyebrows raising. That is fraud, ma'am. It is family property, she wailed. We are a family. She is supposed to help us. Is she on the deed? The deputy asked, pointing at me. No! Darlene yelled, and then, in a moment of pure, unadulterated fury, she let the mask slip completely. She is not on the deed because she is not real family. She is just the baggage Warren brought along. She is nothing. She is an ATM machine that stopped working. The silence that followed was absolute. My phone was recording. The deputy's body cams were recording. Robert, the fake wholesaler, was staring at her with his mouth open. She is not real family, I repeated softly. No! Darlene spat at me. You never were. You were just there. We tolerated you. We let you sit at our table. And this is how you repay us? By keeping what is ours? It was never yours, Darlene, I said. Just then, another car pulled in. It was my father's SUV. He must have been waiting down the road, hoping Darlene would secure the deal so he could swoop in and sign the papers. He got out of the car, looking hopeful, until he saw the police. He froze. He saw Darlene shouting at the police. He saw me standing calmly with the deed. He saw the wholesaler being questioned by the second deputy. Warren! Darlene screamed when she saw him. Tell them you have the power of attorney. Tell them we are selling the house. My father walked forward. He looked at Darlene, her face twisted in hate. He looked at the deputies, who were now reaching for their handcuffs because Darlene was resisting their commands to step back. He looked at me. I stood there, tall and unmoving. I didn't beg him with my eyes. I didn't ask for his help. I just waited. Sir, the deputy said to my father, do you have a valid power of attorney for this property? My father looked at the forged document in Robert's hand. He looked at the handcuffs clicking onto Darlene's wrists as she continued to scream about how unfair life was. He looked at the reality of what his passivity had created. He had created a monster, and that monster was about to devour him. No, my father said. His voice was quiet, but clear. Warren! Darlene shrieked. What are you doing? I do not, my father repeated, looking at the deputy. The document is not valid. Jada is the sole owner. I have no claim to this house. Darlene's scream was a sound I will never forget. It was the sound of a parasite being ripped from its host. She went limp, sobbing, as the deputies guided her toward the cruiser. I need you to confirm that in writing, sir, the deputy said, pulling out his notepad. Given the confusion. I have something better, I said. I pulled the final document from my folder. It was a quitclaim and release of interest, prepared by Sarah. It stated that Warren Ramirez permanently waived any past, present, or future claim to the property or its contents, and acknowledged that he had no authority to represent the owner. Sign it, I said to my father. In front of the officers, and this ends. I won't press charges against you for the forgery if you sign this and leave. But Darlene goes to the station. My father took the pen. He didn't read it. He just signed. He handed the paper back to me. His hands were shaking. "She is going to jail?" he asked, looking at his wife in the back of the police car. "For tonight," I said. "Probably for fraud and resisting arrest. You can bail her out, with your own money." He nodded. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of the man he used to be, years ago, before he decided that peace was more important than integrity. "I am sorry, Jada," he said. "I know," I replied. "But sorry doesn't pay the mortgage, and sorry doesn't make you a father." Will I see you again?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe one day, but not here, never here." He turned and walked to his car. He looked old. He looked broken. But he also looked, for the first time in years, like he was facing the truth. The deputies took statements. Robert the wholesaler was let go with a stern warning, sprinting to his car like his tail was on fire. The cruiser drove away with Darlene, her face pressed against the glass, watching the house she coveted disappear from view. I was left alone. I stood on the deck. The sun was high now. The lake was a brilliant, sparkling blue. The air was silent again, save for the birds. I looked at the house, my mother's house. It had survived the invasion. It was still standing, and so was I. I walked to the front door. I put the heavy silver key into the high-security lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I looked back at the driveway one last time. It was empty. The ghosts were gone. "Family," I said to the empty air, "is not the people who demand you sacrifice yourself to keep them warm. Family are the people who respect your boundaries and celebrate your flame." I stepped inside and closed the door. I locked it, not to keep them out. They could never get in again, but to keep my peace in. I was Jada Ramirez. I was the owner. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I really want to know where you guys are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your country or city. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story. See you in the next one.